Welcome to the Bradley J. Show. We are live with Craig Fitzgerald, who's editor of Subaru Drive, among other things. And we're going to talk today about myths involving EVs. And Craig, he's busting these myths, and I will question him as if I'm a skeptic, because
Yes,
I'll
be a
represent
skeptic.
I'll
Be a
represent
skeptic.
I'll represent the skeptics out there. Doesn't mean I am skeptical about everything I ask. However, I want to give Craig a chance to address any issues you might have. So,
Yeah, in general, there's a lot of information out there about these things, probably more so than any other vehicle I know of, and a vast majority of it's wrong.
all right. So,
Like,
one is the a myth. EVs catch fire.
right. So this is one of those things where there's like a grain of truth to something, and then it just explodes to epic proportions. So an EV, when it catches fire, is more difficult to put out than a vehicle with a gas engine. The batteries tend to burn, and they burn real hot. And early on, the fire departments were not trained. They may have been trained in the city of Boston, but they may have not been trained out in Holyoke, Massachusetts, to deal with these kind of things. Now what they do is they blanket them, and they put the fires out, and they don't, generally have an issue. But the number of fires, cars catch fire all the time. Gas engines catch fire all the time. The numbers are startling, right? So the National Fire Prevention Association says that, something like, there are 40 million EVs operating globally as of early 2024. About 1 in 100,000, end up catching fire.
What causes them to catch fire, by the way?
I mean, it could be any number of things. It could be, it could be the same exact things that causes a gas engine to catch fire, which is, a short somewhere. Electrical fires happen in cars all the time, regardless of, what type of propulsion system they have. It's always going to be an electrical fire, obviously, with an EV. So it's just a different type of fire to deal with. A lot of the other things are like, the people have this kind of idea that these things are dangerous when they're in the charging mode, when you've plugged a charger in, that kind of feels like it's a more, opportune time for a fire to happen. But it's, that's also when, when a gas engine is going to catch fire too. There's a reason there's a fire suppression system on every gas pump in the United States, is because they catch fire all the time at the gas pump, which is, a potentially really dangerous situation. So, but the likelihood of fire is something like 1/25th of an internal combustion engine. It's not just, I think what people get confused with is like, oh, well, yeah, gas engines catch fire because there's more of them. But when you take it down to like a per 100,000 vehicles in service, a gas engine is 10 times more likely to catch fire than an EV is.
In either case, what should you do if your engine catches fire? Run away?
Yeah. You want to be out of that thing. You like, watch an F1 race, watch a NASCAR race. The first thing those people want to do is get out of the car, because that's the biggest danger. Once, if you've been in a crash and there's a fire, you want to be out of that thing, and you want to be as far away from it as possible.
One time when I was working in a hospital, for some reason there was a battery in a closet.
Yep.
And it exploded. My God. Most people haven't seen a battery explode. It's a significant thing.
It really is.
A danger of, and I guess that happens in folks' gasoline cars. If it does off gas, some explosive gas,
Right.
and if it doesn't, it's not well ventilated, and you go to jump your car and causes a spark. If there's gas not well ventilated,
Yep.
like under a hood or in a closet,
Well,
it can blow up. And
that's
so,
exactly right.
So, is if a battery in a EV is a bigger thing, is that an issue?
It's a bigger thing, yeah, for sure. It is likely. I mean, not likely. It is capable of catching fire that way, the way a laptop battery would. That's the thing. On an aircraft now, they don't want you to have your laptop battery in a checked bag, right? Because in the cargo hold, if something were to happen, that would be a bad situation, right? So it would be it's a much less I guess it's something you can deal with if you can actually get your hands on it, right? And you can put that out in some way. I mean, oxygen starves a fire in an EV just the way it, anything else. But you're right,
Okay.
like a battery, like a lead acid, typical 12-volt battery off gases, some really explosive gases, right? So that's why when you're jumping a car, is the two most dangerous things you can do with a car: put gas in it and jump the battery. And that's why, like on the dead battery, you want to take that negative terminal and connect it to a ground in the vehicle and not the battery itself, because the likelihood of a spark is that much less.
So if you're going to,
the whole point of doing that.
I don't want to talk much about regular old lead acid batteries, but
Yeah.
it's good for people to know how to do it. If you need to jump your car, you left your lights on or something, whatever reason, super cold,
Right.
need to jump it, you open the hood for a little bit, make sure it's aired out. And shouldn't you wear eye protection? Because if they blow
Correct.
up, there's sulfuric acid in them, right?
Sulfuric acid in a 12-volt battery, and there's a 12-volt battery in an EV too. That's
Okay.
what runs the accessories.
Oh,
So
all right.
these things are like they're the propulsion battery is a completely different system than the accessory system in an EV. Just the way in an ICE, you've got a 12-volt battery to kind of maintain a constant 14.3 volts to not only run the car but to run all the accessories too.
Okay. And so you got your cables out, you got your eye protection on. With me, I'd have face protection too. So you go positive, negative, and then ground, and hopefully you choose a spot on the ground that ain't hovering right over the battery. So that gives you a
Correct.
little distance just in case something goes south.
Correct.
All right. Oh, look, we got some we got some comments. We have a couple of comments here. One from Dizzy. Always wear proper PPE. And Sean Budd says, I will never go back to gas. Oh, that's a friend of Craig right there.
That's John. What are you driving? I'd be interested to know what John's driving, what Sean's driving, because the people that I know that have converted, to an EV that have not gone out and bought, a Hummer EV, for example. They bought a normal car and they commute into Boston. They're not trying to tow a Bobcat with it every weekend. They've been really happy with them. And I'm always interested when somebody, mentions what they're driving, because it kind of helps me understand, what people are actually driving. Because that's the thing, is like a lot of this disinformation that's out there is on the extremes. It's on like, the most expensive and the biggest and the heaviest, and it's like, okay, that's fine. Nobody buys those. What they buy is like the stuff right in the middle, which is basically a crossover SUV, just like a RAV4 would.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
those
Sean
are the
Budd,
things
if
I'm
you,
kind of interested in.
Sean Budd, if you're still there, tell us what you
shoot
bought.
me a note. Let me know what you're driving them.
And Sean Stapleton said, "Did I see you at Warehouse 9 in Somerville last night?" Yeah, you did. Interesting. I
Oh,
went to
me?
see
No,
you.
not me. That must be you, Bradley.
Yeah. I was there, strangely. Okay, let's move on now. Myth Number 2 is about to be busted by my friend Craig Fitzgerald here, automotive editor. And it says DCI on his little picture, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, are they expensive? Are they expensive? The myth is they're really expensive.
Depends
And
on what you buy, just like anything
okay.
else.
All
They'll
right.
be happy to sell you a $120,000 EV, just like they'd sell you a $115,000 F-150. But again, it's like, what are most people buying? Most people are buying, a relatively small, mid-size crossover SUV. They're roughly the same price as an ICE would be when you factor in the $7,500 tax credit. Actually, one of the ways that people are really sort of getting to experience an EV without the risk of actually having to go buy one is they lease them, because the $7,500 tax credit comes right off the top. It ends up going to the dealer. So what happens is the price of the vehicle drops by $7,500. You get that right off the top, and it comes off the monthly cost of the lease every month. So a lot of people are doing that as a way to kind of experiment and understand how an EV is going to work for them. So when you do factor in the tax credit, when you factor in some things like Ford Motor Company, if they sell you an EV right now, they're gonna give you a free charger, and they're gonna install it for you like sort of a normal installation. If they have to dig 80 feet of trench to put a cable in for 220 volts out to your garage, then it's going to be more expensive. But in general, they will get that charger installed, and they will give you the charger for free, which is, that's $1,000 value right there. If you went, you were going to go out and buy it yourself, could be more than that even. So the cost really, it's negligible, the difference in a cost between an EV and the cost of overall ownership over the period of time that you're going to own that vehicle is going to be much less with an EV, because the electricity costs that much.
Rudolph
We are going to
wants
get to that question in a minute.
Okay, we're going to get to that question in a minute, so I'll let it go there. Dizzy, who's an engineer, by the way.
Yeah.
What do you think about a possible influx of Chinese EVs?
They don't have a dealer network here. So the way things work in the United States,
Except for Tesla.
Except for Tesla, and it only worked for Tesla because they were willing to go to court in every state to bypass franchise laws. The way franchise laws work in the United States is they require that if you're going to have a dealership in the United States, or if you're going to sell a car in any of the 50 states in the United States, you have to have a physical dealership, and you have to have a service facility attached to that dealership. And you have to allow a dealer, a franchise dealer, to come in and essentially buy that franchise from you. That's the only way you can buy a car in the United States and not buy it from a franchise dealer is to buy it from Tesla. And that's only because they fought tooth and nail for 10 years.
That's interesting. Since they won in every state, isn't that set case law now? And couldn't you just say, hey,
it is, but you still need to go through that entire process. And I don't think that Chinese manufacturers are willing to do that. What's the easier thing for them to do is to sell you, they will do a joint partnership with Lincoln. You can already buy a Lincoln that has technology from China, right? Gas, EV, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But you're already buying some of these things, and you don't even know it in a lot of cases. We sell a lot of Chinese cars at the moment.
What if the Chinese just built a whole new car, a whole car, and called it a Lincoln? And then they could sell it at the dealership.
The idea that all of a sudden Chinese manufacturers are going to be here and they're going to be selling like crazy, I don't see that happening right away. And I don't really see it happening in big numbers Like Chery tried to do it years ago, never got off the ground. I think there's a lot of resistance to it, from consumers. Like like if I had the choice between buying something Japanese, Korean, American, Mexican, I don't care. If I had the choice between that and a Chinese vehicle, I'd choose any of the other ones before the Chinese vehicle, because I know that the safety standards are not up to what they are in the rest of the world.
Okay. Next myth, number 3. EVs are heavy because of the battery and bad for roads.
Right.
So they are heavier.
This is what we took. Well, not necessarily, right? So again, what we talked about was cost. Sure, they'll sell you $100,000 one, and that $100,000 one weighs 9,500 pounds, but they sell 2,500 of those a year. Like, who cares? Like the difference between that and the 750,000, 5,500 pound F series that we sell every year, like it's a drop in the bucket comparatively in terms of overall weight. Most EVs. So a good example is like the Hyundai Kona. They have that in both. They have it in all 3 forms. You can buy one with a gas engine, you can buy an EV, and you can buy a plug-in hybrid, or a hybrid, I guess. And the weight difference between the EV and the gas engine is like 600 pounds. It's like 2 passengers or 3 passengers, basically, or most of your luggage on a weekend, right? So it's not a significant difference. Like 700 pounds isn't going to make any difference to anything, So and most of the ones that are in that sort of mid-size crossover, that sort of size vehicle, the weight is comparable to anything else that's out there. It's within 300 or 400 pounds.
Okay.
So they're not that heavy. Where they start getting heavy is on things like the Hummer EV, the F-150 EV, because they have to pack those things with literally tons of batteries in order to get 300 some odd miles of range out of them. If you're in one of the smaller vehicles that, the Hyundai, for example, you don't have to put a big battery in it to get 300 miles of range out of it. So, and the other benefit is it takes a lot less time to charge it. So, if you're in the market for one of these things, those cars that are in the kind of middle of the market size wise, those are the ones that are, they're most popular. They're going to sell more of those, and they're going to be comparable to the weight of, any, mid-size SUV that's on the road today.
In your estimation, what % of people that buy pickup trucks like F-150 need the pickup truck function, and how many buy them just imagining themselves to be adventurous or more masculine or whatever that is?
20% is the generally accepted, yes, I use this as a truck on a regular basis. Most people, 85, 90% of the time, they're using it to go from their house to their office and back. They're using it as a commuter vehicle. And they do it because of the image. They like it. And I don't have any problem with that. If you like a pickup, that's great. But, I think what happens is a lot of people who own pickups think that they're towing every single weekend. I'm towing a horse trailer every single weekend. I go 600 miles on a Saturday. Most people don't do that. Yeah. You may have, and like, it's like saying, well, you shouldn't be driving a full-size pickup into Boston every day as a commuter vehicle. Like, that's a dumb idea too. Like you don't want to do either one of those things. No vehicle is going to cover 100% of the bases, I guess that's why the SUV is so ubiquitous, especially mid-size SUVs now. Yeah, they're everywhere. Mid-size SUVs in black, white, or silver. That's it. And they all look exactly the same. Right. So, you don't like a vehicle, you like the shape of this vehicle. Yeah. And you just need to find one that fits that, Okay. Before we continue for the second half, can you still do 10 pull-ups? I probably can't. I probably can't. I'm still running, but I don't
Good.
know if I can do 10 pull-ups today.
There was a time not that long ago
I know.
when Craig could do 10 pull-ups.
I was doing pretty good there. I need to get back to that.
Well, I can't even do one. I don't think. So, I mean, I have just chicken arms. Okay. Myth number 4, EVs are expensive to charge. And I guess that's kind of where are there enough charging stations would come in.
Right. So let's address that first. Are there enough charging stations around? 85 some odd % of the time, the charging station's in your house. So, you're like if you're a daily commuter and you go back and forth to work 5 days a week, you're going to charge that vehicle in your house every single night. So yeah, there's a charging station probably way more conveniently located than a gas station. Remote charging only ends up being about 15% of the charging that people do when they own these things. So, you're going to Maine for the weekend or something, you're going, occasionally on a cross-country trip, then you're going to look at, how many EV charging stations are around. They're everywhere. So I just did a map for a friend of mine the other day. It's a really good resource. The Department of Energy has a map of every type of fuel station across the country. So you can select the gas stations. You can select hydrogen stations, of which there are about a dozen in California and nothing east of the Mississippi. The EV charging map, in even the DC fast charging EV map, it covers the country. Like, they're all over the place. So what you need to do is really utilize the power of the car, right? So when you're driving an EV, the infotainment's, and navigation system is going to tell you exactly where all those charging stations are. And you can select between DC fast chargers, which are gonna, which can get you from 20 to 80% in a lot of vehicles in about 25 minutes. You probably want to have those, filtered out if you're on a road trip. If you're going somewhere where you can park overnight and you can utilize a level 2 station, you want to filter out for those things, but the car will do that for you. They're really sophisticated. And they'll point you in the right direction. I mean, I use them all the time. I go between here and Maine all the time, and I've had really good experience using EVgo and Electrify America charging stations. They're all over the place in Portland, for example.
It's strange. On the way to the White Mountains, at one exit, there's a Dunkin' Donuts, and the Dunkin' Donuts has a row of Tesla. I think they're Tesla brand, but I can't be sure. Kind of red,
Yep,
with the oval thing. Like, I don't know, 8 of them at a Dunkin' Donuts, just off 93. In case anybody needs to.
So
get charged.
those Tesla stations now, if you're a Mustang, if you're a user of most other EVs at this point, you can get an adapter that will allow you to use those Tesla stations. You didn't used to be able to use those, but now those have opened up. So that, effectively probably doubles the number of charging stations that are out there.
That's good info.
But I've never used one. I always use the independent stations, and they seem to work pretty well. I will say that you will find some broken chargers. There's no question about it. They get vandalized by people who seem to not like the idea of EVs, and they have issues here and there. But I've been driving these things kind of regularly for 4 or 5 years now. I've never not been able to charge somewhere.
Like, I can understand somebody who doesn't want to drive an EV, but I don't understand someone who hates that you do and that other people do so bad that you would wreck a charger. What kind of dick would you have to be to do that? What kind of messed up turd head would you have to be?
Yeah.
The boss says Dizzy, but a Mach-E, what's that, a Mustang?
Mustang, yeah.
Okay. With the mid-range charger setup, saved on gasoline, but spun the electric meter so fast that he perceives the saving is minimal. He got a gym membership with free charging. What does he mean by spun the electric meter so fast?
So, you're going to use more power. There's no question about that. When you plug that thing in at night, and you can do the math to figure out exactly, how much charge you're going to need to get you to 100% or whatever. But the cost is absolutely, when you're charging at home, is absolutely less than filling the tank. When you do the math and you figure out, okay, I used X amount of kilowatts, that got me X amount of miles. When you do the same math for a full tank of gas and that equal number of miles, if you're charging at home, I don't care where you live, it's less money. In Massachusetts, we have some of the most expensive electricity in the country. And, you're going to spend more than you would in, say, Ohio. But you're still not going to spend what you would on gas. Gas would have to be $1.20 a gallon in order. Say that facetiously, probably around $2 a gallon to make it, comparable to if you were charging at home. But the other thing to consider is that, like, depending on what state you're in, you've made a larger impact in the environment too by switching to an EV. So, for example, Maine, most of their energy in Maine comes from renewable sources. Like 25% of their electricity comes from solar, 25% comes from wind. I can't remember the figure, but a big percentage comes from hydroelectric. So they use very few fossil fuels in their power generation. So you're making a much bigger impact. Like, you can't say that in West Virginia where you're reliant on coal still, but here in New England, we actually do, have a fair amount of renewable sources for electricity. So,
okay. An aside before we get to the final myth that you're going to bust. Drag races. Are there any? Can an EV funny car beat a gas funny car? I mean, they have such torque and all.
You know who did it? You know who was into this?
They must have.
You know who was into it more than anybody was Big Daddy Don Garlitz. He was the first guy who went to 200 miles an hour in an EV. He had an EV dragster, and he has been into it since the get-go. For a long time now, 15, 20 years. Since before you could actually buy an EV on the open market, he was experimenting with this stuff.
So do you get to a point? Pioneer. Do you get to a point where, with a dragster, in order to compete, you'd have to have so many batteries, it'd be so heavy that you would not be able to beat the gas one? Because with the gas one, you only need a spit of gas.
Right.
And so in order to go fast, you really need to, it's too bad they didn't make a small battery that would shoot all its gumption at once, but right. No, I guess they don't.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I need to look at, because they'll tell you what the weight is on any of those. They all have to go across the scale when they run. So it'd be interesting to see what the weight difference is between a top fuel dragster and an EV dragster. But I can tell you also, F1 cars are now, they're basically hybrids, right? So they're using both, gas and electric power in F1 cars. There are charging modes when they're trying to recharge the battery to pass, when they're kind of using electric technology. And then there's a whole different EV circuit too that F1 operates called, what is it called? I forgot the name. Anyways, but there's an EV strictly F1 racing program now too. So you're starting to see more of that.
Wow. I wonder if they have rides at the fair that have go-karts that are little EV ones. Maybe.
Have you been down to the go-kart track in Foxborough?
No, they have that.
I guess it is. Yeah, they run go-karts indoors. They run a racing go-kart, two tracks, and they're all electric inside there.
Wow.
They're very cool.
All right, myth number 5. And a little story before we get to myth number 5. I'm in the process of watching a thing called The Old Man.
Oh, good one.
With Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow.
Yep.
And I don't know if I want to give it away, but it involves a lithium mine, and they show the lithium mine. And there's a war being fought over a lithium mine, or kind of. There's factions. There's a lot of fighting going on. It showed a picture of it. It was looked like an ugly strip mine. I mean, I guess all that's redundant. And so lithium, isn't it one of those rare earth metals that are rare? And is it a limited amount that is in the ground? It's tough to get. Is expensive? Does it cause problem getting it? So that's a long way of getting at lithium mining. Worse for the environment. The question is, the lithium acquisition process is bad in a number of ways.
There's no question about it. Anytime you dig something out of the ground, it's going to be bad for the environment, right? So here are the numbers in 2023. Worldwide, we mined 180,000 metric tons of lithium. At the same period of time, we mined 436 million metric tons of coal in the United States alone. So if we're going to talk about environmental impact, because that's kind of the negative discussion about these vehicles is always like, whoa, lithium mining's horrible. It is, but the scale of it is infinitesimal compared to coal mining, oil production, gas production. Like these things aren't even comparable.
Okay, being the skeptic, firstly, it is partly infinitesimal because the percentage of electric cars globally is infinitesimal. Correct. Secondly, just because coal mining is awful doesn't mean you should have another awful thing. Yeah, it's true. Coal mining is awful. Everything about coal is nasty. I get it. And what was the other thing? I forget. But that's two things.
Yep. So I will say there's a couple of things going on too. First of all, give it 10 years. We're not going to be using lithium at all in these batteries.
Good.
I mean, they're like the technology is changing so fast. Like gasoline production has not changed a bit really since the 1930s. Years. Like we do it the same way. You refine gasoline the same way. You pump it out of the ground the same way. It hasn't changed. Battery technology has changed significantly at least 3 times since you've been able to buy an EV on the open market, which is the last 10 years. Like everybody knows that you can't, pull lithium out of the ground forever because it's a finite resource. So you've got to find different ways to do this. So there's sodium batteries that are being experimented with. There's all kinds of things that are going on. But even if we get to the point where we're selling an equal amount of cars and an equal amount of gas cars and an equal amount of EVs, we're never going to get close to the destruction that we go through to pull, let me see, how much 12.9 million barrels of oil a day out of the ground in the United States. Like that's crazy. It's insane. If you can
surprised that I'm surprised the Earth's crust hasn't caved in. That the world has pumped so much liquid out of the ground. Doesn't it leave a big empty spot that can cave in?
I don't know how any of this works. It's like the volume that we do every single day is just, it's mind-boggling compared to, like copper is the other thing. Like that's the other component that EVs utilize. But copper mining is for everything, right? It's for, all kinds of wiring and all kinds of, it's like there's a tiny percentage that goes into, an EV. So like we mine 22 million metric tons of copper every year, but it's maybe 7% goes to EV production. 93% goes to everything else. So even then it's just a small percentage of this stuff. And you're right. I mean, part of it is the volume. It's the volume of cars that we're building, but we're building more all the time.
How long till hybrids go away and it's all
I don't think you're going to see it for a while.
Electric.
Matter of fact, so what you saw immediately after the pandemic is EVs kind of cruised along a little bit and then spiked during the pandemic. Hybrids did exactly the same thing. Hybrids basically had no sales volume for 2 decades. And then we got to 2021 and they went just like that. And it's because there were incentives to do it. It's because the price of gasoline went through the roof. All of these things conspired for both of those things to kind of take off at the same rate. They're almost like the sales volume is almost the same for EVs as it is for hybrids. And they're a great option. If you feel like, well, I want to be more fuel efficient, but I still want to be able to, rely on the gas engine. Hybrid's a great first step. A plug-in hybrid's an even better step because you can do all of your around town driving on the electric motor, and then utilize the gas engine more on road trips and stuff.
It seems like though with a hybrid, you got to lug around 2 sets of equipment. Like you need a catalytic converter for when it's burning gas, right? And you need to have a gasoline engine, and
right.
You're lugging around. It's like,
you have
breasts on a bull hog.
Right. So, one of the things I like about an EV is that the maintenance, it basically is non-existent, right? It just runs. An electric motor basically runs forever. The batteries in general, you're protected by a warranty for 80,000 miles or 10 years. And then even after that, they're functional. They get completely recycled afterwards. So, again, with the lithium stuff, all of that, every bit of that material in an EV battery gets recycled 100%. So, you're right. There's that added complexity where not only do you have an EV with a hybrid, you've got a gas engine too, with a timing belt, with an exhaust, with all of that stuff that, is just going to go bad eventually.
It seems like a plug-in really, if you could do it, would be the thing to do if it goes basically if it goes as far as you need it to go.
Yep. My only issue with the plug-in hybrids is, and there isn't hard data on this because the manufacturers won't release it. But the thought is that a lot of people don't ever plug in their plug-in hybrids. They buy them, they get lazy, they end up using the gas engine all the time, and they get worse gas mileage than if they just bought the gas engine version. If you buy a plug-in hybrid, you got to plug it in and you got to utilize that in order to see any benefit at all. Okay. But I think they're great.
One final thing before we say goodbye to Craig. Tesla, I'm hoping that when you think of hybrid, you don't automatically think of Tesla. I know it was initially the case. They were synonymous, but there are a lot of other EVs by people who make cars and know how to make cars.
Yep.
And one thing I want to plant a seed of doubt in any person who wants to be perceived as masculine. I do.
I don't care.
I know you don't. I know, but there are people out there that I want you to know that a lot of folks, when they see a Tesla, they think, that's a feminine car. I just want to plant the seed into you so you don't buy a Tesla, you buy something else. Feminine car. A lot of folks out there saying that's a feminine car. Do you want to be in that car, Mr. Masculine Guy? I don't think so. Try a Ford or a RAV4 hybrid. I test drove one of those.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan personally of Elon, so that's I would never buy a Tesla. I would buy something else because of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that they sell more EVs than anybody. I mean, they sell 500,000 Model X's worldwide, or Model 3s, I guess, worldwide. It's the most popular car in the United States.
I know.
So
the guy did a good job, man. I mean,
I think I've talked about this before. I give that guy credit for 2 things. One of which was taking on the dealer network.
Right.
And the other one was building his own charging network. Those 2 things.
Yeah.
Like if we had done just one of those with every other car company, if they had formed some consortium and said, we're going to build a charging network, we would not be having the discussions that we have right now about.
Okay. I will give them credit for those things
Yeah.
because they're true.
But the cars, they're not that good.
Thank you.
You know, they have a lot of issues with them. I challenge you to read the Consumer Reports story on the Cybertruck. That thing is it's one of the worst vehicles you could possibly spend money on at the moment. I mean, I've said this to you a million times. You'll ask me, is this a good car? Is that a good car? They're all pretty good cars. They're all pretty decent.
Except for the Cybertruck.
That car is not a good car. You know, I
true?
would not encourage anybody to buy one of those.
Is it true that he gave one to the Russians who mounted a machine gun on it? I mean, I saw the picture.
They may well have. I don't know.
I've seen the picture. Maybe it could have been photoshopped, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's not good. It's all of the things that it was purported to be. Oh, it's going to be amazing off road. It's not. It's too long. It's got a terrible breakover angle. It's got terrible approach and departure angles. It's not good. Not a good off road vehicle. It's not a particularly good EV. It's not good at hauling trailers because the max tongue weight is 150 pounds versus 500 on something like an F-150. So it doesn't do anything all that well. It just looks obnoxious. So it does that. It sure is eye catching, but I would definitely encourage people to explore their options. I think the F-150s, the Lightning is a great pickup. If you're not going to, haul something 10,000 pounds for 600 miles a day, could be a pretty decent vehicle for you. And I just towed a trailer with the Kia EV9 and it acted like there was nothing back there. It worked great.
That's good. Well, we're heading in the right direction on all this. We're heading in the right direction, and you're a big help to bust these myths and at least, folks, try it out. You'll be surprised when you get in a hybrid. It's got some giddy up like crazy. Like people don't understand.
You need to get in one of these things before you make a decision about what they are. Most people that get in one and drive one, their like potential as an EV customer goes right off the chart once they drive it once, because they're pleasant, they're really nice, and they have the potential to be really fast. So I drove the Ioniq 5N. That thing was insane. It was so much fun to drive. And, there really hasn't been anything, outside of supercar level stuff that I've been all that excited about driving in the last few years, except for that. That thing was amazing.
One more thing about style and trends. The Tesla went all in on nothing but a screen. And sometimes things like that don't work out. Are people irritated by having a screen only? Are people perhaps moving back to a simple knob? Because I see straightforward knobs more in cars now. Does Tesla get hurt by that?
Yeah, they all get hurt by that. So one of this came up in the last JD Power initial quality study, and a lot of people saw it. And what the top line of this thing was that was reported in the media was people are unsatisfied with their EVs, right? That was like JD Power initial quality study on EVs, not good. So I went and actually read the study, and every single thing in that study that people complained about was exactly the same thing they complain about in their gas cars. I can't pair my iPhone. I don't know how this screen works. This thing is beeping and I don't know why it's beeping. I don't know what it's trying to tell me. There's a light flashing on the dashboard that isn't telling me what people hate this stuff. They don't want to be bothered with it. And they want things to work the way they've anticipated that they will work. So I'll give you a good example. The Mercedes, all of the Mercedes products at this point, they have a gear shift that looks exactly like the turn signal stock. It's just on the opposite side of the wheel. That thing has caused them more problems than any mechanical issue they've ever had, because It's too similar. You end up like trying to turn the wipers on and shifting into neutral while you're driving 60 miles an hour.
Oh,
And it's the same thing with all of this touchscreen stuff. People don't like it. It's my biggest complaint with everything I drive is, like, I don't want to search through sub menus just to change a radio station. I just want
Right.
the knob,
Right.
So a lot of things like, the Subaru products now, they have a big screen. They have an 11.6-inch screen that does all kinds of things, but the volume knob is there. The station tuning knob is there, and there are up and down buttons for the temperature. That's really all you need, right? You don't need much more than that. It's just those basic functions that you're trying to utilize.
Navigate and the navigation, which you do need a screen for, I guess.
Right, of course.
But the controls to that should be simple too.
What Tesla did was it was like, oh, you know what? We're going to just reinvent how turn signals work. Nobody asked for that. Nobody wants to relearn how to do something that you've done exactly the same way for your entire life. Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense at all. That's like innovation for the sake of innovation rather than like, wow, we see a problem here and we're going to fix it. There's no problem with the way a turn signal works. So, if you're an engineer out there and you're planning to reinvent things like how the gas pedal works, don't do it. Don't do it. Leave it alone.
Right.
Please. We
Craig
hate
Fitzgerald, thank you. Craig, thank you so much for spending such a long time with me. I really appreciate it. And folks, you may have noticed that I'm doing these every day now, at least 5 days a week, maybe 7. I've decided to make it a regular thing. And you know what I'm trying to do, Craig? And it's a technological leap, but I want to set it up so people can call on a phone number, and join us voice-wise. The technology exists. I'm just trying to find the cheapest and most elegant solution. But that's my goal.
That was my favorite thing about, and no offense, Bradley, I love talking to you. But my favorite thing about doing your show was talking to people who called in, who had questions. They're everybody's in the same boat with a vehicle. You're always left trying to figure some things out, and it was an awful lot of fun for me to talk to those folks. So I hope you get that figured out.
So by the way, if any tech genius to see this and know how that's technology works, let me know. Again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'll send you a link to this, and we'll end our live stream, and